Hey guys, so last year this topic was going to be my second video, but then I got busy covering games media hit pieces on Black Myth Wukong and Space Marine 2, then stuff about Veilguard, and then it just felt like too long had passed to go over it. But we're definitely going to do it now because this was originally posted shortly after Summer Games Fest, and was partly because of Summer Games Fest, which will be going live again very soon in just a few days. It's a Reddit post on r/gamedev, and some of you may remember it because it went a little bit viral at the time. It's a developer cope session about how they're tired of us. I thought it was pretty interesting to respond to back then, and even though it's been a year since, it's been a very eventful one with so many deserved flops, so many layoffs, so much drama in general that I just had to revisit this.
Nobody likes being a woman.
Because this is actually so characteristic of the current climate in the games industry, where we have some developers openly expressing hatred against their own fanbases, specifically ones working at AAA, and especially ones who have a rotten mentality of wanting to force change into gaming, change that the vast majority of gamers do not want and are demonized for resisting or simply having preferences that differ from the content that these people make. There are various comments under the post showing support for it, which shows that this is a general sentiment among some circles that gather together in these echo chambers, unable to accept the reality that as developers, they truly are free to create whatever they want. They just aren't free to force people to like it, and they aren't free to co-opt other people's properties to force their niche ideas into the mainstream. It just doesn't work, it's not viable, especially in AAA, and in some cases it's precisely why some studios are now in trouble, among other reasons of course, such as ridiculous bloat and high-level companies more preoccupied with looking good than just making good content. Instead of catering to their player bases, they've been going against them and then wondering why is it that their games aren't selling. But anyway, enough rambling, let's get right into it. Let's go bit by bit so we can talk about each individual thing. I'm a professional game designer and I'm worried that I'm starting to hate gamers. Watching the gaming events on YouTube last month with the chat on was an extremely disheartening experience. Every time a character that wasn't a cishet white man appeared on screen, the chats would fill up with messages calling the game woke or complaining about the AI. Just white man will do in this case. Like, we don't need made up labels like cishet in order to convey our points, especially considering the fact that there's not even any way to know if a character is cishet based on a trailer. Just from this term alone, we can tell that whoever wrote this is one of those people who have gone so far left that they now live in a completely separate reality, one where they can't even be consistent and comply with their own rules. After all, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are not supposed to assume anyone's gender identity or sexuality, correct? How are we to know from a trailer or a short showcase if we're looking at a hetero man or a biological one? Maybe it's a trans gay man. Maybe it's a polyamorous trans masked non-binary guy. Maybe it's a blob of organic matter posing as a man, but who is actually an eldritch horror from the deep trying to mingle with humanity for some nefarious purpose.
The one whose every step shakes the foundation of the world. The one known as François.
Esquier! Stop sending hooligans over here!
We just don't know, and on this channel we are strictly against bigotry, so I would appreciate it if Mr. Developer over here kept his or hers privilege in check. Thank you. Now let's move on. But on a serious note, this response from people in live chats is expected from various points of view. First, you're on a dynamic live chat in a gaming event. You already know how these environments are. People aren't there for careful and concise critique, they're there to have fun. Second, and most importantly, we need the context to be clear here. People aren't sick of characters who are not white or male. What people are sick of is poorly written characters who are designed to just be as obnoxious as possible, or to just push some kind of socio-political message, or just there to check boxes. I personally don't like to immediately jump to assumptions of this kind without being either certain of it or having valid reasons for expressing that concern based on other information that corroborates it. But I do see why it's happening. From consultant companies like Sweet Baby Inc., who proudly admit their purposes and coerce their ways into companies.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
all the way to presentations such as the one at the Game Developer Conference, where activists are on stage not only admitting but also encouraging other developers across the industry to politicize their games. There is no denying the cold hard fact that the games industry is actively being co-opted by activists to push their worldviews into a medium that is meant to be free of this kind of thing. This is a reaction to that. You don't get to be performing a hostile takeover without expecting some resistance to it. Can that resistance be wrong sometimes? Can it be exaggerated? Can it sometimes target things incorrectly and make invalid assumptions? Absolutely. And it's up to us to call that out and hold ourselves accountable for it. But that doesn't stop it from being a resistance to a malicious external force that made the first move. And people in the live chats, they're not going to be having any chill at all. They're just going to be spouting it out no matter what it is, no matter what direction it is. Some of them might not even be serious and just doing it for trolling. So taking it all seriously is not the smartest thing to do, especially given the circumstances that we're going through right now. I mean, these things have been escalating constantly throughout the years. If you don't like the reactionary environment that was created, maybe you should have called it out along the way. Maybe you should have moderated it to keep it fair, balanced, and honest to avoid situations like this happening. Like, for example, pushing back against gaming news media bias, which is at the center of so much of this. Again, you have to call out your own side. You have to keep them accountable. You don't get to pop up now, pose yourself as a victim, and pretend as if this just happened on its own, and suddenly there's been this big blowout of isms and phobias out of the gaming community from nowhere. The gaming community is worldwide. It's literally diverse in the true sense of that word, and as are the games and other pieces of media that we enjoy across movies, TV shows, anime, comics, etc. It always has been, and there's no shortage of diverse characters to show that. Beloved protagonists and strong side characters alike. This has never been an issue until pricks who like to use expressions such as his hat came along to make it an issue and pretend as if nerd culture is toxic and needs activists to come in and diversify it with their terrible out-of-touch additions like their dogshit writing, their ridiculously ugly character designs that demonize strength and masculinity for men and beauty and femininity for women, which also of course seeps into that aforementioned dogshit writing. This and so many other little details and mechanisms such as political correctness, representation, intersectionality, etc. are what people are tired of and are what people are immediately on the back foot whenever they see a new game from a AAA studio getting announced. And again, sometimes they're going to be wrong, they're going to make assumptions that are incorrect, it just is what it is. What people need to do in those cases is call that out, correct it, and move on, which is what happens most of the time. Like, there isn't a graveyard of games out there that failed because of people online talking shit about them, but underneath they were actually masterpieces. Like, if you make a good game, you will sell. But so far, the fact is that most of the times, they've been right. Pattern recognition is not always going to work as some of these companies learn harsh lessons and begin to adapt, but yeah, it just is what it is. Companies handed themselves off to these programs and initiatives, they publicized it for profit and virtue signaling, some even contributed to those aforementioned presentations in game developer conferences by sponsoring them, as we can see here for example. Prismatic People, Queer Narratives Beyond Romance, composed by Cliffhanger Games, EA. By the way, yes, this is the studio behind the Black Panther game that just got cancelled because they were still in pre-production after 4 years of work. The games industry has seen an increase in sincere queer representation in the last few years, where it once used to be absent. However, this representation in mainstream media has been by far centered in romantic relationships.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Gee, I wonder why when we're talking about matters predominantly linked to sexuality, we have a gay character that we have to present. I wonder how we're going to do that. This is so ridiculous because this is one of the issues that exists with these kinds of characters these days. Is that back then, people just wanted to write a really good character that was relatable, that was normal, you know, just a character, and it happened to be gay. It was just a thing, it was just a part of the character. But now, you can't even do that. Now, a gay character can even just be a normal character, like a regular character with the same rule sets for building that character as any other character. Now it has to be explicitly gay, and that explicitness has to come through in different ways. Like, it can't come through with the character that's having a relationship with another character who is of the same gender. No, it has to be some other I don't even know what. Like, I guess I should have gone to this presentation presentation to learn what it is that we can do to show that the character is gay without showing that the character is gay, which you already know what it's going to be like. It's, instead of it being normal characters, it's characters like Tash who are insufferable. Like, instead of it being a character like Dion in Final Fantasy XVI, who is a great character who just happens to be gay, it has to be an obnoxious character filled with terrible dialogues that feature contemporary divisive political matters so that they can show that they're queer. It has to be literally their whole personality.
It feels right when she says I act more like a man. It feels right. So I'm non-binary.
If something about being a woman is hurting you, I don't think it's stupid at all.
Why does it feel right?
Tosh, do you like being a woman?
Nobody likes being a woman.
If you are neither a man nor a woman, then what are you?
Non-binary. I just said, and I'm going to use they instead of she from now on.
Some of my friends in Minrathous talk about not feeling comfortable in their own skin. As a man, as a woman. I could see if they'd like to talk. Maybe what they say fits how you're feeling.
Under the Cune, the term for one whose gender does not match the one given to them at birth was a Cunithlock. Perhaps you are like that.
Why do you have to keep picking at it? Why can't you just be happy for me?
Evatosh, Chakra to Ebra.
So I'm supposed to struggle with who I am?
Anyway, enough ranting, let's get back to it. So, however, this representation in mainstream media has been by far centered in romantic relationships, ignoring the many facets of queerness that make up the day-to-day of LGBTQ+ people. Why would any of us give a shit about this in video games? Like, we have to, first and foremost, we have to lay the facts here. We're not talking about a game like Life is Strange, where this kind of stuff is already more than present. We're not talking about random smaller games in the cozy genre that are already designed around these things because it's just what they are. We're talking about random action games in the AAA space. And superhero stuff, like specifically this studio, Cliffhanger Games, from EA, they were working on Black Panther. Same goes for action adventures, RPGs, etc., all of these hyper-fictionalized games in the AAA space. Why would any of this shit matter over there? Why would we give a fuck about the day-to-day of LGBTQ+ people in games that these high-up studios were making? This doesn't even happen for straight characters. You understand that? This isn't even a straight character thing. Straight characters have it. We must have it for LGBTQ. No. Characters are just characters. Write me a good fucking character. Show me the day-to-day of an interesting character. Tell me an exciting story. Like, what the fuck is this? Now we see why this Black Panther game got fucking nuked along the studio. Instead of doing any relevant work at all, they must have been sitting around trying to figure out how to include and represent the many facets of queerness that make up the day of LGBTQ+ people in the Black Panther universe for 4 years. Also, by the way, check out who was on that panel. It's mentioned right there on the third paragraph. Dani Lalonde from Cliffhanger Games. Here's a famous clip of hers from back when she worked on a small studio making a dating game.
I have a team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team for indie games.
Very, very large.
But who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team.
What exactly is your problem?
How much time you got, buddy?
I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me.
Some people are really fucking stupid.
And I'm not saying that white people in the industry are creating unsafe environments. I'm not saying that. That is not what I'm saying.
Right.
I am saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something may be okay, but it was really a microaggression.
What, are you retarded? So I know you're not retarded.
And no one wants to deal with that while they're trying to make a game that they love.
But, what are you, Down syndrome?
Wasn't that a fun clip? I swear to God, man. How do you... Oh, man. There's also other panels just like this one hosted by other big studios like Respawn, Sony, Capcom, 2K, Riot Games, Ubisoft, and of course Sweet Baby Inc. This is what we got going on in the games industry, so spare me the bullshit, and spare me the crying and whinging over people in live chats who are sick of putting up with it, not just in games but also in TV shows and film across Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, Netflix, Amazon, HBO, Hollywood in general, etc. This is a classic instance of people reaping what they've sown, and honestly, it isn't even something that should matter if you're just a normal, regular game developer making the games that you want to make for the audience that you cater to and grown. This is only an issue for activist developers trying to push some kind of agenda onto people, or for developers who are sadly stuck in positions at companies who put activists in charge even though they disagree. But in this case, they probably wouldn't even be mad at gamers, they should be mad at the leadership in the company taking them all down the road to bankruptcy. But admittedly, I do empathize with these people a lot more because it's a tough situation. You have to either do your job or you speak out and risk getting fired. It's just too bad that when a company ends up in a really bad situation and goes through layoffs, the people at the top who made these decisions to begin with and who allowed this kind of thing to go on, they never go away. In fact, sometimes they even get a bonus check. Next up is... every game that wasn't a shooter or a hyper-casual competitive online game garnered ZZZs and boring comments. This one is either straight up lying or the result of a massive disconnect from the gaming community, which isn't even surprising when judging by the friction between developers like this and gamers who voice contrasting opinions online. Hyper-casual competitive online games, which are usually these shooters to begin with, are the #1 thing that people are sick and tired of seeing. There's one that I can think of that's been getting positive attention recently, which is the next Battlefield, because of going back to the roots of Battlefield 3, but aside from that, people are so over this generic shit, and the top games that people got excited for last year was stuff like Phantom Blade 0, Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, etc. I mean, Jesus, even Star Wars Outlaws, which got a lukewarm reception for looking generic and had a really bad launch for being so incredibly boring and broken, had a more positive outlook in comparison to trailers to generic Battle Royale or other live service adjacent bullshit whose names I can't even remember anymore. And when those kinds of games also happen to have ugly designs, and holy hell, not even their genres or gameplay loop can save them, as we saw with Concord and look at Marathon right now. By all means and metrics, it should kind of fit into this hyper-casual competitive online shooter category that apparently, according to this developer, is the only thing that we're interested in, and yet the reception to it was dead. Not even the Actman could summon excitement up for it. Even content creators who focus on positivity or whatever they call it, even they were expressing feeling totally ambivalent to Marathon's trailer. And Clair Obscur Expedition 33, the French baguette game, completely breaks this entire narrative down. It destroys it. It's the farthest thing away from a hyper-casual competitive online shooter that any game could ever be, and yet here it is, selling like hotcakes, dominating social media, and getting a bunch of people calling it their personal game of the year. This comment was utterly disingenuous and makes me feel very doubtful about everything else that's spoken in this post. You are letting bitterness blind you, basically. This industry has proven time and time again that what we want is good, passionate games, stuff that is fun to play, that tells good stories, provides unique experiences, and that is fairly priced. Expedition 33 isn't even the only unique example right now, because as we speak we have people glazing Tainted Grail, yet another indie game with a massive scope trying to bring us a solid classic dark fantasy RPG adventure, which AAA has seemingly forgotten how to do. And a couple of months ago, people on PC were going crazy over Schedule 1, yet another well-made, but this time smaller scope indie game that regardless managed to grab people's attention and money. There's been a huge focus on indie games this year, and people are excited for things that have released and things that are upcoming, and neither of them fit this silly description at all. Next, And then I checked Twitter and it's just people complaining that the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake is not yellow enough, people telling me that there are right and wrong ways of beating Elden Ring, and people hating on the new Dragon Age because the trailer doesn't match the tone that they had imagined for it. What? What's the problem with complaining about the yellow thing? Like, is there anything at all that we are allowed to complain about here? Is there anything at all that we are given the blessing to criticize, or do we just have to shut up about everything and consume product? This wasn't a drama, it wasn't a controversy, it wasn't anything at all problematic. It was a few fans of the original game saying that the remake was missing that yellow tinge that the original game had. These things are actually usually pretty important when it comes to remakes and remasters because they are the way that people remember them, and they can heavily contribute towards the setting and the general atmosphere of the game. For example, recently the Oblivion remaster released and people rightfully complained about the lack of vibrancy and color in it. And it's actually a damn shame that this hasn't been addressed yet and might never be addressed, since it's something split between two studios with a contract, Bethesda and Virtuous, and we don't really know how much they're going to care when it comes to details like these that go beyond just making sure that the thing runs. It's kinda like the Skyrim re-releases. Bethesda could have fixed some of its most annoying bugs, but they didn't, despite continuously adding more content via the Creation Club updates. The remaster would have been objectively better if they had worked that out, because Oblivion's vibrancy wasn't just a graphical style from back then, it was a characteristic of Cyrodiil, a very lush and lively fantasy land teeming with life, magic and prosperity. If you are unable to understand how important the visual design of a game is, how much a certain look or characteristic can impact its atmosphere and make everything come together in a way that takes you back to the good old days of playing those originals when you were a kid, then that's your problem. Thankfully, Konami did not share this ridiculous viewpoint and actually advertised that they'll be adding a legacy mode that not only adds that classic yellow tinge but also changes the camera and other aspects to imitate the original's playstyle. This kind of attitude towards paying customers is just so stupidly characteristic of these kinds of people in the industry. Gamers aren't always right, I'll give you that, and sometimes even when they're right they can come across as assholes, which is understandable when people are offset by them. I get this, but valid criticism is valid criticism, and you need to be able to separate both and do what's best and what's needed for your games. Otherwise, it's just going to end up buried in the same graveyard that Soy Squad, Concord, Dustborn and Veilguard are buried in. And this Elden Ring thing, I mean, come on, listen, it's social media, okay? You have the very best and the very worst of humanity exposed to you. It's up to you to choose what to focus on. And instead of focusing on the fact that many people in the Elden Ring community pulled together to go lay down their summon signs in front of Mog's boss arena in order to help newcomers get into the DLC area, you're choosing to focus on a few people trying to tell you how to play a game. This has never been a big controversy or problem either. Stop being so petty and move on. The vast majority of the Souls community is positive, at least to those who embrace it. Of course, if you walk into the Souls community and you start demanding changes, things are going to be different. But if you're just a newcomer and you want to ask which game you should start with, or which game is the hardest, or tips or advice for how to get past certain bosses, this community is fantastic. And now the Dragon Age thing, boy oh boy were those people right about it. The problem with the design and tone shift in the trailer was that it could have potentially been a warning sign of a general problem in the game. This is usually something that is pretty consistent across any kind of media. Trailers are made for people to have an idea of the product being made and to generate hype behind it. If the idea they were conveying was not only not correspondent to the tone, vibe and art style of previous Dragon Age games, but also looking downright terrible, like some cartoony hero shooter trailer, then that's obviously going to get negative comments from a community that's been invested in the series and waiting for this sequel for years. And the funniest thing is that this was already piggybacking off of a name change from Dreadwolf to Veilguard, which had people immediately concerned that this sequel was getting away from what it was supposed to be, a sequel centered on Solus. And then you watch the trailer and it's like the Power Rangers of cringe assembling with next to no mention of Solus whatsoever. So of course people were concerned, in more ways than one, and now we look back and we see how right they all were. So yeah, again, like I said, you don't listen to your fans, don't listen to your paying customers, treat them like dumbasses or scum that exist solely to gargle on whatever you make, treat criticism and views as hatred and bigotry, and stroll around with that massive sense of entitlement, by the way, of these intellectual properties that do not belong to you to do whatever you want with them, and entitlement to our money regardless of the quality of the content that you make, and all of these are just ingredients for the tried and true formula to have your games land on the garbage graveyard. Next, I've seen people implying that the main character in the Fable trailers is ugly because it's a self-insert of some random level designer working at Playground whom they have deemed not fuckable enough. The uglification of female characters, one of the most toxic, anger-fueled topics in gaming discourse. I have no idea what this person is talking about with this developer thing or whatever. I think it's been pretty well established that the main character of the Fable game is modeled after an actress. This has been already circulating since last year, so I don't know what this rumor is about. Sounds like yet another case of like a handful of bad apples talking shit on the internet, and then whatever they're saying is just being upscaled and generalized for all of us, and getting appropriated to misrepresent the argument of wanting appealing female character designs. First, a general rule. If you're going to enter this discussion with the argumentation that people are upset at bad-looking female characters because they don't deem them fuckable enough, you're already missing the entire point. You're using a ridiculous strawman to defend a position that you know that you cannot defend with logic. Because at the end of the day, regardless of anything anyone can say to try and demean or shame people for criticizing this, the fact is that unappealing design is unappealing design. People don't like it, people don't want it, and that's a general rule. I don't even know why the fuck I have to say this. I mean, people get together with other people that they find attractive. People buy cars that they find aesthetically appealing, people buy clothes that they like the look of and that fit them well. Hell, people buy decorations for their walls in their homes. Doesn't mean that the walls are ugly, doesn't mean that they wanna, fuck the walls.
What?
Just means that the walls could look a little bit better. When a gamer buys a keyboard or a mouse, they're always going to look at the specs, but they're also going to take the looks into account. The best looking keyboard for whatever person is what they're going to buy. When people buy a couch or a refrigerator, it matters how they look, so on and so forth. It's only obvious that when it comes to video games and characters in them, the same things are going to apply. It has nothing to do exclusively with bangability. One of the things I mentioned in a reply to the first point in this video about some of the ridiculous things that video game activism has brought us is challenging social norms such as beauty standards by deeming beautiful and or attractive characters as a bad thing that needs to be replaced with other designs that challenge that, especially female characters. And another reason is just the general hatred for their own audiences, which are predominantly male, making progressively unremarkable or straight up ugly characters to fight against this so-called male gaze, some made up bullshit that these morons created to demonize specifically straight men for thirsting over fictional female characters, while simultaneously writing articles like this, encouraging other people, such as women and gay men, to thirst over fictional male characters. Surprise, surprise, more double standards showing the utter hypocrisy of these activists. Hell, let's take another one that is funnily relatable to this and Veilguard. So some people complain that the Veilguard characters looked like ass, which prompted David Gator to spaz out online calling people incels for complaining about the characters because they weren't hot and attractive enough. Then at the same time, here we have Trick Weeks, one of the writers in Veilguard that got fired, affirming that the companions of Veilguard were, to a one, absolute smoke shows. Now, to make sure that we don't get anything out of context, let's get the definition of smoke show. Smoke show is a slang term that describes a person, typically a woman, who is very attractive and appealing. It's a casual way to compliment someone's physical appearance. The phrase is used more often to describe women, but it can also be used for men. So, if you're complaining about the Veilguard because the fictional characters aren't attractive enough and you wish that they were, you're just a disgusting incel loser. However, if you find those same fictional characters to be attractive already, to be smoke shows, then you're all good. Get gooning, fellas. You're only an incel if you're, I don't know, if you have higher gooning standards, apparently. But you know what? All good on my watch. I say, let them keep being disingenuous, let them keep being hypocritical, let them keep proving themselves to be unworthy of our dollar. Plenty of Eastern and indie studios happy to take our money instead, while these people cope and seethe on Reddit. I get it, there's always going to be some toxicity in the way that some people talk about these things online because it's the internet, and there's always going to be a few who take it a step further, whether it be talking seriously or just making fun of a situation online with memes or videos, but it's not at all representative of what the vast majority of people have been complaining about, and it is totally unrelated to this obsession with turning this conversation into bangability. If you're interested on a deeper dive on this topic, check out this video on screen right now, it'll be linked down in the description and top comment. I made it like 7 months ago, sorry about the overall lower quality of the audio, but the matter is still relevant today. And finally, I don't know, maybe it's just the internet magnifying negative voices, I guess, doing what it does best, but it's making me real tired of gamers. I don't want to be facetious, but honey, if you're getting tired of your entire customer base, you may want to consider some therapy or a career change, because continuing to do work for people you despise for no good reason is obviously not healthy. It's terrible for morale. Listen, yeah, the internet does tend to magnify certain things that are often not representative of the general sentiment, but part of that also comes from your very own judgment and perspective of things. You have to be able to see the forest for the trees, or whatever the fuck the expression is. It's not about reading the absolute worst comments you can find and attributing that negativity to the entirety or the majority of us, but it's also not about reading these same comments and thinking, oh, this is just a minority of people and there is no actual nuance whatsoever here. The majority of people are actually in full agreement with me. A few assholes on the internet do not represent the whole, but there is definitely a huge consensus out there against many of the exaggerative things that have been pushed into entertainment. It all started in small things that people tolerated and rolled with because inherently most people are either agreeable with things that they can compromise on, or they're just not going to bother with something if it's small, because unlike terminally online internet activist types, the average person out there has a life with more pertinent shit to worry about, instead of whether or not the 86th gender in the non-binary umbrella is being fairly and proportionally represented in media. And also a big factor in this is that a lot of people did not realize that there was an actual money and governmental driven agenda pushing this. The moment that that blew out onto the open is, in my opinion, the moment that Gamergate 2 truly sparked. Like, I don't even think that it was that article about defending Sweet Baby Inc. I think it was the realization that Sweet Baby Inc. was an avenue for studios to get higher ESG scores. It's an element that just made everything so much dirtier. In the beginning, most of this wasn't even about whether or not people agreed with these kinds of messages that were being pushed into stories and games. It was more about what it was doing to those stories and those games. If the result is bad entertainment, bad games, sometimes games that are so bad that they ruin entire franchises and result in layoffs, then people are going to be against that. And so should developers and companies, because it's obviously bankrupting them. And it isn't even that people want their games to be politicized in a way that agrees with them, which is a ridiculous argument that gets often thrown around. It's that they don't want any politicization at all, they just want an escape from it all. Video games, movies, TV shows, etc. are supposed to be entertainment, not political commentary. If I want political commentary of the left variety, I'll just tune into a Sun stream. The issue is, some people are so lost in this obsession that to them, if a fictional setting or story does not inject contemporary divisive politically charged themes, lines of dialogues, gender identities, etc. into them, even in settings where they don't make any sense at all, like medieval fantasy, then that means that they're being right-wing, which is just fucking crazy. And this is something that's even pushed by the media, like all the outlets calling Black Myth Wukong a toxic game that was attracting toxic right-wing fan bases and making stances just because it didn't feature diversity quotas. I have no idea how a game in a mythological Chinese setting can be representative of right-wing shit, but here we are. And in cases like these, there is truly nothing to be done. People will politicize shit all on their own, which is funny because I see some folks online mock the idea that some right-wing people use the phrase, "we are the party of common sense." But in reality, it looks a lot like leftists have made this characterization true by politicizing normal, purely neutral things as right-wing. But anyway, sorry, this is totally veering off topic, so I'll stop and get back to the point. All of this just to say that the majority of people are just normal folks. If you keep demonizing them for shit that they didn't do, dismissing criticism that they have, politicizing them and their medium when the last thing on their minds is politics, and going against their fan bases when handling their beloved franchises, you will never find any happiness while working in AAA. And that's because I assume that this person is working in AAA. If they're not and they're like an indie developer or whatever working on, for example, cozy genre stuff, then they should just stop hyperfixating on what's going on in a live chat for such a mainstream event like Summer Games Fest, because that's very likely not their target audience, and they just don't understand it. It's like being a bricklayer and going to a party with lawyers or some shit. In general, it's actually a great idea to not listen to what a massive live chat at an event like that is saying, because toxicity will be on the rise no matter what it is. If an Xbox game is on screen, PlayStation fanboys are going to be talking shit. If a PlayStation game is on screen, Xbox fanboys are going to be talking shit, so on and so forth. Even a company like FromSoft gets hate in live chats. And it's not a partisan issue either, because if a game like Stellar Blade comes on screen, a bunch of pussies are going to show up like, oh, this is a gooner game. Like, it just is what it is. Welcome to the games industry. Why are you whining about a live chat and making your takes on gamers from it in the first place? Like, seriously, what the fuck? I know some of these words may be harsh, but hey, there's no names and no identities here. Just a couple of people with a couple of differing opinions. There's nothing to offend, nor am I trying to do so. I'm just trying to reach out with real talk. Look inward, drink some water, ditch the Kool-Aid, and make peace with the fact that the gaming space is for you and for me. It's for all of us. Make the games you want to make, just don't be surprised at negative reactions if what you want to make is not compatible with the audience and the monetary prospects that you're making it for. Take a look around and you'll find no shortage of indie developers making all kinds of niche, diverse, and inclusive games in their own corners of the web with their own communities. There's no chud movement trying to run them out of gaming. Make peace with the reality that you've been demonizing people because of misconceptions based on lies and misrepresentations that you told yourself or that you've been fed by other people and the media. And then, I don't know, live your life in peace and in health, because things really aren't that bad. They're only as bad as you make it for yourself and those around you. You're not going to catch me watching Summer Games Fest while looking at the goddamn live chat. I'm either doing it via a streamer whose community I already like, or I'm catching up with the trailers the next day. Alright, peace out, hombre, or chica, I don't fucking know. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving me a like, and if you're new, subscribe. Next up is probably going to be an Atomfall breakdown video, unless something else comes up first. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.